Good morning and welcome, everybody. I'm Tamsin Rose, and I have the great pleasure to be your moderator for day 2 of the EPALE Community Conference. We had a fantastic day yesterday, lots of lively debates and exploration, and some really interesting discussion about the importance of aligning our heads, our hands, and our hearts, the intention and attention in order to deliver the sustainable change that we all know that adult education can deliver. Today, we're going to go in more detail and in more depth on a range of these different issues. Like yesterday, we want you to be part of this conversation. If you would like to comment or to see the comments that others have put, you need to log in via the EPALE website. So please make sure you're logged in as well as watching us live. We want to know what you think of the EPALE system and the platform. We're delighted to say that we have 200,000 visits per month, and we've just reached 100,000 individual users. So let's find out. You'll see a QR code on the screen, which will allow you to go and to look at the user survey, and you can give us your feedback about what works, what doesn't, what you'd like us to see more of, and how you'd like to change it. Later today, we've got some panels that will feature some of the people that you'll find on the community stories section. And I really encourage you to go there because we had some really inspiring stories yesterday from people who feature in the community stories. We also want to bring your attention to the Eurydice report that was published just a few weeks ago. And that focuses on adult learning and training in Europe and investigates current approaches to promoting lifelong learning with a particular emphasis on the policies and measures that support adults with low levels of skills or qualifications to access learning opportunities. And it covers 42 education and training systems across 37 European countries. So it's really comprehensive. And if you remember yesterday, we heard that the people who have the most need of adult learning opportunities are often the people who least access it. So this report will give you a little bit of insight about what different countries are doing across Europe to try and address that gap. We also wanted to find out from you yesterday. We created a word cloud and we asked you the question, what is the power of adult learning in shaping a sustainable future for Europe? Now you're going to see on screen the results of the word cloud from yesterday, but it's still open and we encourage you to keep putting in your ideas as the day continues. And at the end of our session this morning at lunchtime, we'll show you the new version of the word cloud, but just to highlight what you showed for us yesterday. Right at the heart of it, at the center of the word cloud, is the word activism. So it's clear that adult learning is an opportunity for people to get a sense of change, to become activated in their lives and to have a sense of agency and control. We see the words flexibility, transformation, social justice coming through, networking, cooperation, collaboration, human-centric skills. And I know that's a topic we're going to be picking up on today as we focus on the digital environment. Sustainability, accessibility, hope, experiential learning and knowledge, a fair transition, encouragement, perseverance, innovation and transition, all words that came out of your reflections on what you think the power of adult learning is to shape a sustainable future. Yesterday, we talked about the digital transition. We talked about the fast changing labour market. We talked about the need for a green transition. And we identified how the economic impact of the COVID pandemic, which has yet to fall because there was a lot of government support that is now coming to an end. So there'll be a big economic impact. We identified how much the adult learning sector will need to step up and scale up in order to help people address and deal with these big transitions all happening at the same time. And that's clearly shown in the word cloud that we asked you to develop. So I'm really excited to see at the end of this morning's session how this word cloud has evolved based on what you've heard. What else do you think is the power of adult learning in shaping a sustainable future for Europe? So those are all the different ways we'd like you to interact with us through comments and questions to our speakers today, giving us feedback on the EPALE platform via the user survey, and then giving us the input on the word cloud to see what you think is the power of adult learning to face the future. So this is the end of the little announcements I wanted to make for you. We've got another fully packed agenda for you today. and lots of activities. So, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce to you our keynote speaker for today. It's Mrs. Divina Frau-Makes, a professor of media sociology and literacy at the University Sorbonne Nouvelle. She's also the founding member of the European Communication Research and Education Association, ECRIA, and the president of the NGO Savoir Devenir. Well, welcome, Divina, to the EPALE Community Conference.
Hello, Tamlin.
Hello. We're going to focus a little bit on media awareness in a rapidly changing environment. And as we know, we've spent the last 18 months largely online in a media saturated environment. But let's focus a little bit about the importance linked to the functioning of democracy. In Europe, exercising the right to vote has been linked to the right to free education, which has been guaranteed by the state, with the logic that educated citizens can make rational decisions and then elect leaders that will act in their own interest and to the benefit of the community. That's the principle. So education has already been seen as a cornerstone of our democracies. But right now, we can see the weakness of the assumptions that underpin this model, because even within the EU, we see democracy under threat. We have 2 or 3 countries that are being in the process of being investigated by the European Commission for gaps in their democratic governance. So let me ask you, how do we use education to strengthen both our social cohesion and our accountable political systems?
Thank you for this very simple question. Well, I think we have to reinvigorate education. I think we have sort of fallen asleep on the great strides we accomplished in the 20th century thanks to education and a whole mass, critical mass of people being educated. And one of the things we forgot was that today, with the rapid change, education has to be lifelong and life-wide. It's not just about what happens in the school, in the formal system. It's also about how adults continue educating themselves. Those who are going to lag behind are the ones that are not able to transition onto the digital competences. So that's one point. And we've also not paid attention to the fact that we had a competing system educating people now, which are the social media, the social platforms that are presenting themselves more and more as marketplaces of ideas, as places for interactions and exchanges where you make up your opinion. It has sort of stolen the light a little bit, these social media, from what the schools are. So I think it's very important for schools and for all the centers for adult learning, and EPALE is key, to become platforms, to see themselves as online platforms that have the added advantage that they are real life platforms. So this double combination, this augmented digital empowerment that is provided by the digital world, to me is a key moment to ensure that the values that we've developed in the 20th century, and the values of education, participation, freedom of expression and opinion, they transition also on the digital. And so it's key for us to keep this in mind and to turn schools, universities into social networks of their own, increased sociability that will enable people to live together, because one of the enormous bonuses of the education system is not just about learning to learn, it's about learning to be together.
Thank you for this. And you're picking up on this issue about the media platforms and how they've become an entire ecospace that is effectively carrying out education, even if that's not what they set out to do. Let's pick up a little bit on this importance of critical media literacy, because you've written about this. What does this actually mean, and why is that so important?
Well, it's important because these social media are media, as we say, but they don't have the obligations of the traditional media. So they have a lot of freedom, including the freedom of conveying fakes. And so we have to train all citizens, the young ones and the older ones and the seniors, to the fact that their media, with their own manipulation system, their own ways of gathering information, their own ways of making disinformation, etc. So the word critical is about just not being taken by the flow, the easy surf online, this image of the surfer that is so present in the online world, and the sort of ease and the blue that is an image that is like you, Tamsin, which is to say benevolent, open, etc. Well, you know what? There's also a dark web, and we're also mining people's data and people's profile. And so the critical media education is about seeing the surf and the mine, and being able to navigate between the two, make your choices, and know when you decide to be funny and surfing, and when you decide to be careful and serious, and mine the data that are important for you. So what I'm trying to say with critical media education is please explore all the potential of your brain. You were saying that yesterday also, your brain, your hands, your heart, and the way I do it, I try to transmit it, is by making people be active about it. So I push the idea of taking at least 3 possible postures, roles that you can take online. It can be just the explorer role, just follow your curiosity, go down the rabbit hole, see where it takes you. Then you can also have a position that is more like the data analyst, a bit more serious. Hang on, what am I being offered here? Why am I being sent to this next trend, etc. And then, of course, the most powerful and the most engaging role is the one of creator, which is to say a producer of your own knowledge, your own content. And one of the great strengths of the social media is that they are ready to mediatize, which is to say you can right away create your own little channel, you can answer to a post yourself, you can build an idea, share it, and in this sense, critical media literacy is not critical just in the negative sense. It's critical in the sense it's important, and internet is a critical resource. According to the Council of Europe, I totally believe that.
So it's critical. We can't live without it, but you've given us, 3 different roles that people can use to find a way to navigate between the surfing and the mining. Let's now just talk a little bit about some of the dark side and some of the challenges, because as you say, the internet has all the good stuff. It has cat videos and it has lectures from universities, but it also has hate speech and radicalization and even fake news. More recently, around the pandemic, of course, we've seen how important it is to be able to identify disinformation and fake news. People have been encouraged to look at fake cures, or there's a lot of anti-vaccination messages that have been put out, conspiracy theories. And we live at a time when almost every issue seems to be polarized. There's an opportunity, every belief is radicalized. And hate speech has almost become the norm. Just in the last few weeks, we've seen footballers make complaints about some of the hate speech against them, racist speech that's starting to be prosecuted. So how can media literacy inoculate, vaccinate people against fake news when so much of their news feed might be filled with it?
Right. The bad news is that the metaphor for inoculation, in my opinion, doesn't work. I'm sorry, we're tempted to do that because we've been living in a pandemic, and God knows we've been told to go and vaccinate. So, but it's not exactly the same thing. I wish it were. I could just inject you, the media literacy vaccine, and get you a booster, and you're done. No way. No way. The good news is it takes time, and it takes people, lots of people, lots of community, lots of expertise. And that's where, again, education, the platform for knowledge that schools are, that universities are, that EPALE can be, where you have both knowledge and the emotional surrounding of the experience of others coming. That's a very important way of dealing. And media education has always been a multi-stakeholder approach. You never do media education alone in the classroom or in front of your screen. You bring in a journalist, you signal, and you bring in or you discuss with a social media influencer, whatever. You always show that media are about communication and information together. So that's something that I think is new in the traditional school system, this getting out of the school, showing that the school is part of a larger environment, which is maybe what's one of the problems with schools as they became solidified at the end of the 20th century. I call them sometimes bunkerized. You get into the school, the parents are outside, everybody's outside, just the teacher and the student. Well, maybe not, maybe more. So that's one of the answers to the inoculation. Now, inoculation too is true, something that has caught us by surprise because we were surfing and we didn't see that there was a tsunami coming, and at the end of the tsunami, a rock called media troubles, information disorders, in which in media literacy we put all of them together. You know, there's hate speech, there's fake news, there's propaganda, there's cyber attacks, there's really very nasty stuff out there. What we try to do is to put it into a perspective and say, well, you know, these are also human activities. What's new is that we've also realized that they are part of activities of our brain. We have learned a lot about how a brain works thanks to these troubles. This is a sort of thank God there's a bonus to these troubles, is that we've realized that we humans are prey to our emotions, are prey to our cognitive biases, our cultural biases. And if there is a system that is going to push for our fears and our angers, then it's going to take the nasty turn it has taken, which is to say that people are going to go anti-vax, anti-education, anti-etc., etc. So it's been for me a good shaking signal, and I think we're at the stage now where we are responding and rebounding on these, which is to say, putting disinformation and disorders at their correct place and starting to build up education systems that are resilient about this and that find strategies, innovative narratives and counter narratives to answer back. So it's not inoculation, it's reaction and it's resilience that is built slowly with all the tools we have of the school, of the other actors, the journalists, the developers of applications, plugins that allow verification, etc., etc. So I think we are reaching now a more balanced moment where we can reestablish, even in our brain, the knowledge of how we can be manipulated, how there are biases like confirmation biases, authority biases, and where we follow the idea of a leader, or an idea that we thought was true a long time ago and is no longer adapted. So learning about this actually is very important for uncertain times, where we are required each time to shake our past knowledge and test it with the current realities. We thought that everybody accepted the scientific idea that vaccination was good, but it was obvious. So we did not prepare for the fact that some people would say, I don't want to. And so but what do we do with these people in democratic countries? We don't shut them out. They have to be welcomed in. So we have to go talk to them. We have to show them the merits. We have to show them that there are controversies, but the controversy is not a fake news. It's a process of scientific development, not to be confused with a fake. And just resetting the basics about this, scientific information, journalistic information, right away, for most people, will be an extremely efficient way of dealing with it on a daily basis and alone, with a sense of agency.
Thank you. Yesterday, one of our speakers from our community stories, Jakub from Poland, talked about his experience. What he does is he uses films or TV series to provoke conversations around sensitive topics like LGBTI rights or other human rights issues, the rights of refugees and migrants. So often in very uncomfortable topics. What he does is he brings snippets of TV series or films as a trigger to start these uncomfortable conversations. And I think that matches very much with what you talked about, which is bringing it into the emotional context and bringing people together. But let me ask you about a more challenging issue, which is that some of what's being stirred up online, some of the hate speech, some of the conspiracy theories, is being done deliberately. There are states that are seeking discord within Europe, seeking to undermine community, social cohesion, etc. So how do we counterbalance that? So we find a lot of hate speech sometimes is being triggered by troll factories in countries, large countries quite close to the EU or further away. So the answer seems to be, from what you're talking about, is bringing people together and as a community making decisions about how we want to react to each other. But the forces are lined up against are sometimes even rogue states. How do we respond to that?
Well, first we point that they exist because, of course, because they are rogue and they are in the dark web, we the normal people don't know about them, and that's what disinformation and media literacy based on research, it has to be evidence-based, research-based, can prove. And we have been able to prove it, be it in the US, be it in Europe, and there's several researchers that have been able to show that, and the Stratcom is regularly showing how it's happened, how the trolls are motivated. But what's interesting is that it ties again with our cognitive biases and our cultural biases. Rogue states are lazy. They will not create necessarily a ton of fake news. They'll just look at one or two fakes, even in our own countries, that are based on our own fears. And then they'll troll just that. And it's a very simple mechanism. Once you explain it to people, they detect it right away. So, for instance, in France, we are terrified of things like the veil, because it attaches to our religious neutrality. So, of course, the trolls, anytime there will be somebody, one case in France, real, about the veil, they'll troll it and they'll attach it to a fake context. And the French are persecuting people with veil. We have less than 80 cases of veil issues over the past years, So among a population of 64 million people, come on, come down. And so we explain these mechanisms. We explain the mechanism of trolls. We explain the mechanisms of filter bubbles, and where people can be enclosed in the same type of media consumption that they have done in their past. The phenomenon of echo chambers, and where people are caught in communities that thrive on exchanging fake news, but always it's very specific topics. It's about climate change. It's about migrants, it's about Islam, and as soon as you identify these and point out these mechanisms, how it's amplified, etc., people are understanding. The novelty that we try to make people understand with media literacy is that it's not just propaganda as in the old days, because in the current situation, each user can be complicit. If you click without knowing or knowing about some fake information, it can be amplified, and it takes about 2 hours online for it to go viral. And then it takes journalists or researchers about 14 hours to debunk it. Okay, can you see the damage? 214, there we are. So these mechanisms at the beginning were not visible, and what we try to do in media literacy and in critical media literacy is to say, see, this is how it's done. This is where you can interfere. This is also where you can stop it. And so we give back the agency to the user, and we tell him, you are in charge also. We don't try to say you are on charge for everything because there are other responsible agents there, and the platforms, the regulators, whatever. But at least it gives the feeling that to the users that they're not sitting ducks and that are waiting to be shot, sitting on a tree and doing nothing. And so it's this idea that you can react, that you can build your own resilience, and that you can continue navigating and surfing online, avoiding some of the obstacles.
Thank you. I think this again links to very clearly to what we talked about yesterday with Otto Scharmer, our keynote from yesterday, where he talked about fear and how fear drives a behavior, and what it does is actually narrows our focus. And you've again talked about that because fear is a strong emotion and it is most likely to trigger engagement. Fear and anger, and these then become monetized as the business model of these platforms. And you have again matched what we were saying yesterday, which is something needs to be brought into consciousness in order to pay attention to it. So if you tell people to look, they're going to trigger this button, look for it, and then they start to see it. They see the traps and they find a way through it. So you've given us already a potential roadmap on how we might civilize the online environment. Let me pick up on something else, which is around the speed of change. You mentioned this huge difference between 2 hours for something to go viral and 14 hours to put together the effort to debunk it. And we live in this very fast changing world. The technology is changing, the trends are changing. How do adults keep up and stay up to date with all the change? Can our cognitive capacities just cope with this?
Right. Again, for me, coping is not enough. It's just like inoculation. Coping is you still just you're getting all the thing there, and it sits on you, and it creates anguish, another emotion that sometimes can paralyze you, like fear. It creates anger. Probably our colleague yesterday said it. On the contrary, it drives you to act and overreact, which is how you get the polarization effect. But the way I see this going beyond coping was what I call learning to become, which is the name of my UNESCO chair. It's called Savoir Devenir in French. No good translation for the moment. Anybody who has an idea is welcome. I didn't take it, just from thin air or from just surfing. I try to build on past experiences, of course, like all of us adults and all of us educators. It comes from a beautiful report at UNESCO that was called Learning, the Treasure Within. And this withinness is something that caught my attention. And it's a report that was coordinated by Jacques Delors, the guy who helped create the European Union. Okay, so we are completely in EPALE because we have to be together. It's togetherness and withinness. This kind of this is how we become humans, and this is what we are. And he's the one who propounded, something that you all use without knowing where it comes from: learning to be, learning to do, learning to learn, learning to be together. It comes from that report, UNESCO report. And so I added one because this report was done in 1996. Guess what? Nothing that we're talking about was happening because internet was not yet the commercial amazing thing that it has become, and social media appeared only in 2004, 2005. So I felt the need to add something to help people deal with the now, what's within us now. And becoming is this being able to project yourself in uncertain times. Because you learn to be, you learn to write, etc., express things about yourself, but how do you project yourself? And media literacy, media education, all these new pedagogies, new literacies, they are pedagogies about projects. You build projects out of your experiences, etc. But schools are built on programs, and the programs we've inherited from the past. So how do you match programs and projects? It's difficult because programs are programmatic, which is to say, they're on tracks. It's French, it's history, it's geography, etc. And when you are in a job, it's the same thing. And you have a mission, you have an expertise, and you're on a track. And so how do you get out of a track? How do you get out of a silo to take into account novelty, innovation that comes and bounces on you? So, well, that's taught. That's something that we can learn and train about. And that's what learning to become is about, is put again yourself, your updating to the novelties at the center. And so among learning to become key dimensions, there is this capacity to project oneself in the future, and it's mostly updating oneself. You know, the little symbol update that you have on your email, etc. You are doing it constantly. I'm just bringing awareness to that. You are updating yourself. So it's okay. Calm down. One emotion that is very important to oppose to fear, anger, etc., is the other one, of the fourth, and which is joy. Joy brings calm. No anger, no etc. So what we want is joy, because joy allows you to open up. When you're in fear and anger, when you're in a toxic environment of disinformation, you cannot learn because you are putting all your energy in surviving that. So you don't see all the things that are surrounding you that could get you out in a much healthier, non-toxic environment. Calm and joy do exactly that. You serene in yourself, and therefore you can open up your heart and your mind. So learning to become is about this projection. It's about what some researchers call life streams. I call them life longings, which is to say, and it's also something you all do, you're not just defined by your job. I'm saying you have, and I've looked at you on Google, of course, like everybody else, and you have, you are many personas. Okay, we have been trained to present ourselves mostly as the persona that is in one job. And so online, we often have hobbies that we show. I mean, I have friends who are specialists of cats, of cupcakes, of gardening, and it takes a long part of their life. It's a lot of what they are, who they are, So expressing these life longings, telling yourself, oh, hang on, I'm not just defined by my degree that I took 40 years ago, when you're an adult is really a problem, because your degree 40 years ago today, boy, does it need an update. Maybe your job doesn't even exist anymore. And so people who would like, as adults, to come back into some kind of professional life can depart from their experience, from their leisure, hobbies, etc., and rebuild something and get themselves into another discipline and all that. And what the online world does, and the augmentation that it gives to us, and the empowerment, is that you can also simulate it. You can play with it, Oh, hang on. So if I go into this job, what are the projections? What are they telling me in terms of the demographics? If I go into this gardening, blah, 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 what are the plants that are going to be good for the environment? Maybe I should specialize in that. If I specialize in that, what is the CO2 that I'm going to help bring down? So all these things you can simulate online. The play is simulation. Simulation is always about real life. Play is about real life, but without the risks of real life. That's learning to become.
Thank you. It was a really fascinating topic, and I recognize lots of elements that we spoke about yesterday, I think will come up later today. But most importantly, the one thing I think I would really take from your message is when the world feels crazy and fast and it's impossible to keep up, by reconnecting to our joy is where we find our internal calm, so we can control our interior speed even when the world around us is moving, and it's reconnecting into that. Just like yesterday we talked about connecting the head, the hand through the heart. So it's a very consistent message that we're getting. Let me now bring in my colleague Sarah, because she's been watching the online comments and questions, and I think she wants to bring in a few elements from our audience. Sarah.
Yes, of course. We had quite a few messages and comments just pointing out how the things Divina was talking about are central, especially about things that probably resonate with our own experiences, like trolling and polarization. So that's really central. And then we have a couple of questions, specific questions, one quite general and the other one very specific. So I will read them out. So the first one, thank you. And it seems that the citizens' participation is key for democratizing the media landscape. If citizens participate in the media also as creators, do you think that the very concept of citizenship might change? And the second one, the more specific and concrete one, is how do you plan to react at famous people officially declaring in public that nowadays education is no longer important as long as one can find everything in the internet?
Okay. Well, citizenship, it's true that all these educations to the environment, etc., that create this nebula of new literacies, including media literacy, digital literacy. They point to soft skills that are required for our living together, the togetherness and the withenness. And they have to transition also. And so citizenship in traditional and pre-digital world was reduced basically at the end into some kind of civics and a certain number of rendezvous, regular rendezvous like elections. So it was sort of threadbare. And in some cultures in Europe, a lot of delegation was done to our elected people, representatives, etc. I think with the digital, there is more possibilities of, I don't like the word direct democracy, but it's a little bit that. Less intermediaries, more access to representatives, more possibilities for local initiatives. And we've seen the surge of the civil society as a main actor of what is going on in citizenship. EPALE, in many ways, as a social media, as a social network of its own, can do exactly that, and with initiatives from NGOs, associations, that don't necessarily require permission from up there, Ministry of Education, DGEAC, whatever. So that's a participatory strength from the net roots and from the people. It's not enough if it doesn't meet the higher parts of a political system so that it will become itself more flexible, more agile. And it's required to be agile these days because changes are rapid, and especially the one about the environment that is preoccupying lots of people. So we do have to add new shades to citizenship. And it's about well-being online, for instance. It's about safety online for some people. With the Council of Europe, we have defined about 10 dimensions for digital citizenship education, which I invite you to look at, that involve media literacy, consumer literacy, etc., etc. To be full citizens, you also have to be very aware as consumers, which we often forget in Europe. There. Now, about all the knowledge being online and no need for schools, that's a nice meme. And we should place it as a meme, which is to say something that is repeated like that, and not really verified, etc. Let's say that the internet has become a huge repository of knowledge. You have, it's true, you take Wikipedia and talk about the treasure within, it's out there. And so you may feel, well, okay, I read Wikipedia and I'm fine. Not so. That is the problem of self-teaching and self-learning. It doesn't have the wider context. It doesn't have the shared vision. So while we can update our knowledge online, and for me, that's the best way to use the online, become online, update yourself, fine. If you are only teaching yourself, just using the machine, not having the interaction with other people, not seeing why studying propaganda, in fact, relates to a much larger conception of how it is to manipulate, how it is to use rhetoric, etc., which is to say, the larger scope in which propaganda is, the larger scope in which disinformation is. then you are not going to be mastering it. You need to cope, but it's a false illusion. Coping is not enough. You have to be resilient and reactive, proactive. You have to pre-bunk, and this is the new term we're using in our world of fact checkers and disinformation hunters. Pre-bunking, which is to say, if you are prepared, you'll see it coming. And then you say, well, okay, I don't click. I debunk this one. I'm going to inform everybody it's a fake. And so that's what I would say about education. It still remains very useful, but the but is important. Education right now runs the risk of becoming obsolete if it doesn't gear up fast to these digital and critical literacies that we're talking about. The program and the project have to come together.
Thank you very much, Davina, for a really fascinating conversation this morning. We've come to the end of our time together, but I know that I personally have learned a lot, and I'm sure the audience has, not least new terminology. I like the idea, savoir devenir. I think this is a great concept, and I'll try to puzzle in my mind how we could say it in English to
it's
have
a challenge. I challenge you all.
I also like the term pre-bunking. To lay the groundwork so people don't click. As you said, things can only go viral if people click on them and share them. That is a choice. And if we can help people to make a more informed choice, to pause for breath before they do it. And so that they calm down. I think these are great messages that we received from you. And you ended with a warning that I think we're going to pick up later this morning, which is education needs to adapt or risk becoming obsolete. The program needs to integrate with the projects. And I think this is a very good final message for us to take for our audience to reflect on. So thank you very much, Davina, for being with us this morning. It was a great pleasure to have you, and you certainly sparked joy amongst our audience. So thank you.
Thank you, Tamsin, for your very perceptive questions.
Thank you. Let's now move to our first panel this morning, which is going to pick up on the issue of digital activism and democracy. And we touched on many of those issues this morning, but let me introduce to you Ivana Stanoyev, the Project and Communications Associate at Knowledge Innovation Center, Niels Eik Zimmerman, a Project Manager at Digital Transformation in Adult Learning for Active Citizenship at the Association of German Education Organizations, and also the Secretariat of the DARE Network, which is Democracy and Human Rights Education in Europe. We have Nenya Wolbers, the Deputy Chair of the Board of All Digital, and Salvatore Scalzo, the Policy and Legal Officer in the Unit Artificial Intelligence Policy Development and Coordination at the European Commission. So welcome all of you. We've had our conversation for this morning beautifully set up by our keynote speaker, Davina, and I'm going to start with Ivana, because she talked about how democracy works and the link between democracy and the digital world. And this is your area as well. You've been an activist for several years advocating for democratization and citizens' participation. When we make the connection to the digital environment, what are the main obstacles for citizens to be as active, engaged in the online world as they are in the real world?
Okay. Good morning, everyone, first, and thank you for inviting me for the conference, and thank you for hosting a conference on such an important topic. And I really have to say that I enjoyed the keynote speech, because it really gave the introduction to what we will address in this panel. And thank you, Davina, for that. So to get back to the main obstacles, I was trying to come up with maybe the list of 5 that I see, and somehow they seem to me that they are very similar in offline and in online world. So let's say that for the first obstacle, I would ask, are we equipped? So this obstacle is the same no matter if we speak of traditional activism, let's say analog, offline, or if we talk about the digital one. Are we equipped, and do we know how to be active citizens? So basically, are we able to critically assess our own civic literacy? Do I know how to make laws, to propose laws? Do I have knowledge and skills to participate effectively in civic life? to knowing how to stay informed, to understand the governmental processes, to know how to exercise the rights and obligations of citizens. So for example, I thought that these are the things that of course I know, but once I changed the country and moved to another one, I realized I'm now the basically third country citizen and lost all my rights, and I had to build up all from the scratch, and I couldn't understand half of the things that were in this new reality. And first of all, the language, but even when I knew the language, it was like, oh my God, I can't understand all these amendments to the laws and what are my rights. So I think that's the first one. Are we equipped? The second obstacle to citizen participation, again, offline and online, I would say, are we committed? Because to make a real change, you need sustained commitment that goes beyond, supporting a cause online. You need deeper involvement that requires organization, structure, hierarchies. So we tend to sometimes overemphasize the technology part in the digital activism at the expense of the activism itself. So we tend to focus on the computer and apps and platforms instead of focusing on what is the cause beyond them, what are we trying to achieve. So I would say that it's not about the tools we want to use, but the strategies that we want to apply. Do we know what is our cause? Do we know what we want to change? And maybe the technologies have changed, but the way the decisions are made today remain the same. I mean, we still elect our representatives and they still decide on our behalf, and we only elect them on every 4 years, and very often we choose not to use these very rare opportunities. So are we committed to really make the change? And then when we are you really addressing the right audience? Who is listening to you, and are you bringing it up to the right table? So who are your followers, and are you being listened to those who actually make decisions? So that would be the commitment part. Mm-hmm. Then the second one is related to that one. Are we co-creating? Because most of the initiatives focus only on the formation of the share of voice online and do not emphasize that much the feedback from government and the importance of co-creative synergies. So we really need to have big table and all the stakeholders there, digitally or not digitally. I mean, digital is just a tool, but we still need to be to have governmental support and stakeholder involvement to achieve sustainability of any type of initiative that we want. Either we use Twitter or, I don't know, a smart voting app. We really need to have everyone involved in the process. Which brings me to the fourth point, are we inclusive? Because when we speak about participatory digital technologies, they are created with the aim to expand participation opportunities for all, but there are also some potential challenges that they could bring even more political and social inequalities. Because many citizens and potential platform users have limited or no access to digital technologies or even internet. So some civic tech tools may increase that divide and further marginalize those who are already at the risk and who maybe have limited limited sources in expressing their powers. So for example, when I think about it, and I'm very enthusiastic about civic tech tools, but I'm thinking, would my grandmother participate through those tools? Would she know how to use the voting apps? Does she even understand this concept? So that's like, are we inclusive is maybe at the core of my thoughts, because the inclusivity is something I do in education at the Knowledge Innovation Center. So that's the fourth point. And then the fifth point, and maybe also to conclude my part and allow others to speak, there was an excellent TED talk by Pia Mancini, who is democracy activist from Open Collective, who said, we are 21st century citizens doing our very best to interact with 19th century designed institutions built with an information technology of the 15th century. So basically, we bring so much enthusiasm for digital tools for activism, while there is still huge resistance to fundamental change of underlying decision-making structures. So are these people who are still our main decision makers, are they ready to accept all these innovations, or are we here who are now here talking, are we early adopters, and then this will become mainstream in 15 years, where there will already be new technologies and this will feel so outdated? And we saw similar things happening now with the move to the digital education, because digital education and digitization of education is something that has been a topic in the agenda of civil society and different education researchers for more than 10 years. But we needed a catastrophe to basically bring this to the table among the policymakers. So are we ready to change? So this is how.
Thank you, Ivana. You've given us lots to think about and lots to digest, not least how we track across 5 centuries of starting from, I suppose, printing technology to our modern communication technology. Let me bring in news at this point, because the DARE network focuses on human rights education, and particularly education for democratic citizenship. And I suppose we're all comfortable with the idea of, do you know your rights? Do we understand how that translates to a digital environment? Do we know what our digital rights are? Are they different? Who enforces them digitally? How do you, from your perspective with the DARE network, how do you address this issue of human rights education for an online world and in an online environment?
So thank you for asking this. In fact, we are not only doing human rights education, we are doing also education for democratic citizenship, which is, and what we always say, the same coin. These are 2 aspects. It is really intertwined. So regarding this topic, I would say, and regarding digital activism and democracy, my assumption is that we have in Europe, in fact, we have a real improvement. Also often criticized, also in this top-down style, citizen participation. Imagine in the best Chernobyl times how difficult it was to get environmental data. So really information increased, and information opportunities for activism and also for non-formal learning. And we have participatory models in urban planning, and also on the bottom-up level. I agree with Ivana's sharing of the obstacles. So, but still, the different platforms, the different ways of organizing, of self-organization, would not be possible without digitalization. Yeah, we have to admit that. And also we are regarding digital competence. So how to include digital competence and democratic principles and human rights, we are also on a good track. We were starting with a technical understanding of digital competence, and then we came more and more to a holistic understanding. Also, welcome to the people from JRC, hopefully listening here. Your good work with the DIGCOM framework. And with the further developments, you were inspiring many people for curricula design and also non-formal education. And thank you to data activists and non-formal educators, which were trying out to do innovative media pedagogy. The challenge is rather now taking it from the youth field into learning of all ages. Like also Miss Frau Meix was referring to. However, I see one gap, and this is the learning about and for the digitalization. So about digitalization is meaning how the miracle box is working. So the big miracle box, talking about platforms, about platformization, about big data. One moment. Learning about the huge and the big picture of digitalization. Not only learning to be a user, but learning which kinds of platforms and platform models are existing. And for learning about digitalization would mean learning about what or agreeing and empowering learners for deciding what path of digitalization we would like to follow. Ivana asked, are activists on citizens equipped for this issue? And for sure, we need to support them, since they are not Google and Facebook and have not the capacities for advocacy, for or for technical developments. So there needs to be more horizontal cooperation. And when we say European path to digitalization, that's also including the big picture. It's lacking in the education and training discourses. So the next generation internet, the European data strategy, they are all talking about a European path, human-centered, rights-sensitive, non-central elements, openness, the fair principles. So citizens need to be aware that there is not only this dragon which we get from the media. So there are also other fish in the bowl. And the way how we want to create the digital transformation depends on citizens and on education. So we need to provide here more. So we need to empower citizens to co-create the discourses and also to explore the different options. Then we come maybe also referring to the statement of Ms. Frau Meix, not to seeing ourselves mainly as affected to hate speech and so on. We see ourselves as prod users, as a mixture of producers and users, which we are. So as competent citizens, as competent employees, or as competent media users in the different roles. And that's the challenge, to address the Europeans in these different roles and not only as deficit-oriented learning. Yeah, and rights and democracy are not the implicit features or add-ons. And it's not only about privacy and copyrights. It's all about all rights, and we need more rights facilitation. I would say as a feature of all learning about the digital, because this is the basis for a more, let's say, constructive and less fear-driven learning about the digitalization. So lacking is, in my opinion, this learning about the digital, the systemic perspective, and the learning also about the different opportunities, social impact and political opportunities.
Thank you for that, Niels, and thank you also for dealing with the phone that was ringing in the background. Nenya, let me bring you in, because Niels has been telling us a little bit about how we empower citizens, so that people understand the digital framework, and he mentioned something about digital rights facilitation to help people understand how they can use it and what they can do it. He also talked about reframing things rather than just a deficit where users need to learn about things, but also see themselves as agents of change and producers and co-creators. So lots of opportunities to pick up on there. But let me ask you about how citizens can be empowered in the internet environment, and what is the perspective that the All Digital Manifesto can bring to this? What light can you shine on this complicated picture?
Yeah, thank you, Tasman, and also hello to everyone. Very nice to be here. Just to show in the camera, that's the manifesto we are talking about. And I just, what I picked up from the things you said before is that it is really important to see the digitization not as a part of our life, like one part, but it's more like it is merged into everything that we are doing. So this is why education and training is actually so important for us, so that everyone really has the digital competences to be an active and, as you just say, a competent citizen. So that's actually one of the biggest aims of this digital manifesto, to say, how can we get there? That everyone is a competent and active citizen. And I said it already, the answer, the great answer is quite simple. So we just say we need a very coherent and comprehensive and consistent training and education in Europe, in all of Europe. And probably it's more hard, the answer, like, to how do we get there? And the manifesto kind of has actually 5 key principles in how we could establish these, having a very EU-wide training and education plan. And one is clearly, and we heard this before, is that it is important that we really address everyone in our society. So non-formal education, of course, but we heard it before, lifelong learning becomes more and more important. And there we don't only think that we should focus on digital competences, but more on the so-called 21st competences, because digital competence have to be merged with other competences as well. For example, employability, active citizenship, but also green competence, sustainable competences. How do we live? How is our well-being online? And these are the facts that we say on the first key principle. The second one would be training has to be accessible for everyone. That means also we have to have enough training offers in place that everyone can really get educated and learn how to use the internet and learn how to also be media and information literate. The key word of fake news was already mentioned before, of course. And also we need various approaches, so online learning, but also face-to-face learning. Different target groups need different learning approaches. And we've heard it before, also we need to be flexible and adaptive to new skills, to new for example, STEM education is now a big buzzword. People need to learn about this, be more inclusive for girls, for other target groups. The third part, or the third key principle, would be that we should have a high standard of quality, of course. So next to all the flexibility and adaptation, we need to make sure that training education is very on a high standard, which could mean, for example, we heard it before, the DigiComp, Neil said it, could be a very underlying, or Entrecom could be a very underlying competence framework for the people, for the educators, for the curriculum writers, to have a really coherent standard around Europe. And it also is necessary that people need to know what they achieved when they get the training and the education. So on which level of the DigiComp, for example, are they? It's important that they can communicate that, as we know this from language skills already for a long time. I mean, if I say I have B2 English, then everyone knows kind of what this means. And we need to have a similar structure for digital education and digital competences. The fourth one is that goes into this as well. It's actually a really broad recognition of these digital competences, as I said before, but also it's not only the learners that need to be recognized, but also the training providers that need to be recognized to have this good quality and standardization within Europe. And the fifth would be that, of course, this cannot only lie on the shoulders of the training providers and the teachers and educators, but also it needs to be very much invested by all levels of government. I mean, on a regional level, on the national level, but also, of course, on the EU level. And that's actually just really shortly what the manifesto is about. Of course, there's more in there, so please read it.
Thank you. And perhaps we could make sure we put a link in the chat to everyone to your manifesto so that people have an opportunity to do that.
Sure,
Is
that would
possible?
Be great.
That's great. We do that. Lovely. Thank you. Let me now bring in Salvatore. We've spoken about the different timeframes that we're today trying to adapt using tools, legislative frameworks, even technologies and education frameworks from the last century and before. And this is a huge challenge, isn't it, for regulators, because you have to work at a certain pace. Yeah, and let's pick up on the issue of AI. Now, the European Commission has a strategy on AI, and it has set out very clearly that it wants to make a human-centric and an inclusive approach to AI. And we've heard some of the reasons why. We talked yesterday and today about the importance of inclusiveness, about engaging people. We talked earlier, Davina highlighted the cognitive biases, the cultural biases that we can have, and the risks. But AI is definitely the future. We can see that it's going to be controlling a lot of our society and our economy for the future. So can you tell me how the European Commission hopes to square this circle of the speed of technology change, the speed of regulatory change, and this search that is uniquely European compared to other parts of the world to make sure that there is a human element that drives and is protected within the AI strategy? It's a tough job. So let's hear how you're planning to do it.
Thanks a lot, first of all, and thanks a lot for the invitation. I'm very pleased to be there. Of course, as you correctly said, it's a challenge. We are trying now to accomplish within the EU, and the fundamental issue behind a human-centered approach, in our view, is that AI should empower humans rather than replacing humans. That is the fundamental concept, because we strongly believe that artificial intelligence has profound benefits for society, profound opportunities for societies, meaning not only societally, but also economically, so for citizens, business, the public at large. But of course, there are many risks which must be tackled in order to facilitate that AI can develop in a human-centered manner, but also at the same time to facilitate the uptake of the AI itself. And we have identified that as being those risks as being fundamentally related to safety and fundamental rights. When I talk about also empowering humans, and then I will really pass to the more concrete actions that we have envisaged, of course, we mean fundamentally three things. First of all, that the humans can understand the AI and its logics, that the humans can control and oversee the AI mechanisms, and on top of that, that the AI solutions are compatible with all the fundamental and important set of fundamental rights within the EU. When we come to the strategy, there are this strategy, as you correctly said, was already traced in 2018. So a lot already has been done. For example, we have established a high-level expert group within the EU, which has already worked, for example, on an assessment list for trustworthy AI. But we have substantiated the whole reflection between 2018 and 2021 into two basic achievements that we have proposed in April 2021. On the one side, we proposed a regulation for artificial intelligence, what we call the building of the ecosystem of trust. On the other hand, we have created and we have put in place a coordinated plan of investments on AI towards a trustworthy artificial intelligence, which is intended to build what we call ecosystem of excellence. So on the one hand, ecosystem of trust, on the other hand, ecosystem of excellence. I start briefly with the ecosystem of trust, the proposed regulation on artificial intelligence. We want to set some rules which ensure that notably high-risk AI systems in the future will be compliant with certain safety and fundamental right-related requirements. I make some examples of what we have in this regulation, just for you to grasp also what this is about. We have, for example, banned certain specific practices which we consider as contravening EU values. Social scoring, for example. AI systems which produce subliminal manipulations and can provide certain physical or psychological detriments notably to vulnerable people. Another example is the remote biometric identification, which is in principle prohibited with just a few exceptions. But in general, the remote biometric identification is also prohibited. On top of that, we took some high-risk AI solutions. We identified them, and we want those solutions to be compliant with certain key requirements, which include transparency, explainability, data quality, notably with regard to what you, Rose, said at the beginning. For example, the issues of avoiding bias or discrimination in the way you train and validate the AI systems. And for example, human oversight requirements. Those high-risk AI solutions concern both safety and fundamental right-related AI systems. I make an example. For example, safety components of very risky products like machinery or medical devices, or some other what we call standalone AI systems in key areas, such as recruitment, public access to public and private services, migration, asylum, and law enforcement. So those areas will be considered as high risk, and therefore we want that before being marketed, the AI solutions are compliant with those requirements. And I stop there for the moment, but for the AI part, for the regulation part, but just also to say that we will encourage for all other AI which are not a risk also the possibility to establish codes of conduct. Now, when we come to the second pillar in 30 seconds, it is important to say, as I said, on the one hand, we have the rules that have tried really to depict in a few words, but rules are always, let's say, quite may risk to be not too efficient if at the same time we don't have the appropriate investments to make sure that on the one hand, the developers of AI will be in a position to really comply with the solution. So they are educated to culture of compliance with the solutions. On the other hand, that the public at large possesses the right skills and the right talents to use those solutions appropriately in a way they are intended. So the coordinated plan, which has really several objectives, has among also its objectives the idea that we will have to create the right talents, skills within the EU in relation to AI through different instruments. And this is a kind of co-shared responsibility between Commission and Member States. If you take a look at the coordinated plan, you will see that there is a plan of actions for the Commission and some for the Member States. And also at the same time that we provide the right incentives and infrastructure for operators to comply with the new rules. For example, the idea is to set also testing and experimentation facilities where also with the appropriate involvement of stakeholders, we could be in a position to test AI systems in a way that they are compliant with the new rules and they are in general trustworthy and inclusive. So this is just really a broad picture of what we have in mind. I'm happy, of course, to provide further clarification. And we hope that this plan, of course, can achieve its results. I just want to make a note that, for example, our proposed regulation on artificial intelligence is the first worldwide ever proposed regulatory framework on artificial intelligence. So we know that the challenge and stakes are high, but we have also an ambition to promote, to make sure that the EU can promote and set also what can become global standards for trustworthy AI. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Salvatore. I mean, it was a lightning fast overview of the range of different topics and the way that the EU is approaching the regulatory environment for AI because of both the profound benefits that this could bring to society and to individuals, but the profound risks that exist. And it is, again, as you said, Europe is the only place in the world that is attempting to set a gold standard by putting humans at the heart of this conversation, at the heart of this technology. I know that our audience have been making comments and have some questions, so let me bring in Sarah with some of the input from the audience. Sarah.
Yeah, we have some comments on something that continues coming into the conversation inevitably, which is digital inclusion. So we have a general one that I will read now. Digital poverty first needs to be eradicated to ensure all citizens have the access as well as the skills. And the second one recalls something that has also been discussed yesterday during our EPALE talk on challenging spaces. The use of digital technology must be improved in our prisons. Low levels of digital literacy are very much prevalent within prisons. So very specific issue and specific also environment.
Great, thank you very much, Sarah. So let's pick up on this issue of digital poverty, and that it is both issues of physical access, and this might be, I mean, we're just talking at a time when energy bills across Europe are starting to suddenly go up. So we need to recognise that digital access requires some physical things. It requires energy, it requires fast internet access, it requires an app, a mobile or something else, as well as the skills. And Niels, I can see you already want to come in on this. And I'd also, all panelists are welcome to come in, Niels, and particularly this issue of prisons. And I would say that many of the settings we spoke about yesterday, so for the homeless, you know, for excluded groups, migrant groups with limited literacy, this challenge of not having access to the digital world will be a big question. Niels, let me start with you.
Yeah, good question and good point. We see it also not only also inside of Europe, with many different affordabilities, and so there's in the affordability indices which are there of the Internet Affordability Initiative, for instance. They are doing reports. You see an unequal distribution. What I would bring into this discussion is it is an intersectional issue. We cannot tackle it just by sharing some smartphones or whatever. That's not the point. You see, for instance, visibility of women in the digital, structural discrimination in ICT education. So even if you are a women engineer, you are having less chances for a job than the male competitioners. Also, you have the better degrees. You have the periphery central thing. Poorness is one aspect. And so I think we can tackle it with education, yes, but in cooperation with all the stakeholders which are in these fields. And what we should not do is to other these people, to make them, to see them as less competent. It's about the barriers. That's what I learned from people, from organizations dealing with advocating for inclusion. So it's really about lowering the barriers and not blaming the people that have these barriers, and also in our language about what is competence and so, yeah. But let's see it as an intersectional thing.
Thank you. Ivana, I saw you nodding. What would you like to add?
Yeah, I was just nodding because Niels was addressing what I also believe, that it's all about the barriers, and there are other issues. I mean, the country I'm from and maybe the region in which I live, it's probably different from other speakers. So I can't really talk much about the prison situation throughout. I can only say that in my region, I think that the digital inclusion in prisons is probably the last thing they are thinking of, and I think that there are far worse problems for those who are in prison, because there are absolutely no ideas how to work on their reintegration in society. So yes, indeed, digital inclusion should be also focused when working with people who are facing imprisonment. But I think that it all depends on the regions, because yeah, in different situations they are facing even worse obstacles than just being maybe offline or without competences to join the digital transformation. So that was just a nod.
Thank you, Ivana. Nenya, let me bring you in on this question.
Yeah, thank you. There are so many good points actually already made. I also think, of course, we know these examples of schools, for example, getting a lot of digital devices and then don't know how to use them, and which is a kind of a waste of money and and equipment. So clearly, also there, the easy and simple answer would be educate them and give them something at like a media concept or some, to use. But I think also Niels is correct. It's not that easy always to just say, please, someone go there with a training. I was thinking in our projects with rural areas, we often have, we rely a lot on volunteers and on people who do engagement in their neighborhoods. And this sometimes I think there we need to empower these the volunteers with so that they help in their communities, that they help in their in schools or even in I don't know, senior citizens home just in the neighborhood, and give them a little bit education or a slight training or just a few simple tips to do this and empower them to do what they do best actually. And for the prisons, on All Digital member in Catalonia, EPALE is making a project actually to go into prisons and educate the prisoners to use digital devices and be more digital competent. And it would be great to learn from them and see how they do this, and maybe find a way to adapt this process on a broader level. So it's done, but very focused. Yeah.
Thank you. And I think this is an interesting topic to pick up on, which is the point of intersectionality. I think that comes up in many aspects when we look at all the conversations we had yesterday and today about equality and access and openness, and the role of adult education as the equalizer to bring in opportunity, to give people springboards for social mobility. That if we look at the power of the digital environment to take that forward, all of the inequalities that you find in our physical world match when you go online, and unless we deliberately try to make our digital environments as open as possible, we risk compounding the intersectionality we found in the real world. And you just need to look at gender issues, the invisibility of women in a lot of the data that's collected, and because of that, the invisibility of women in the products that we design, the services that we design. My area of specialization is public health. The number one killer of women is heart disease, and yet women are underdiagnosed and undertreated and invisible in the way that we develop guidelines for this. So if you're going to train an AI on existing data, it is blind to parts of our population, which is why I think this point that Niels, you brought up about intersectionality is so important. That unless we deliberately reflect on how our current world is flawed, we risk replicating it in the online environment. Salvatore, I'm going to come to you for our last few minutes just to pick up on this issue of time, because regulators work in the way that they work, and even in the best of times it'll take a minimum of a year to produce a new law at EU level, and often takes longer than that. The first data protection directive took 5 years to negotiate. We've now got the GDPR, but it's slow. And the technology is changing. And I just want to talk about immersive environments. So augmented reality and virtual reality, because, if at the moment we still rely on being able to use the physical world to help people understand and get some distance and perspective to understand where they're being manipulated in the online environment, how do we regulate for a future where people might spend hours, days, completely immersed in an environment? Who controls that environment? How are you looking at the AI regulation to make sure that it would cope with this kind of environment that people are expected to spend much more time in than now? If they take the headphones off, they unplug and they move away. We're now talking about neural interfaces. Again, very positive for people who are paralyzed, the ability to experience walking, for surgeons before they do complicated surgery to test something out. Great, profound, positive benefits, but huge risks. So tough question for our last few minutes, but Salvatore.
Thank you. Maybe just this is a complex and multifaceted question. Of course, maybe just one general consideration on the timing, because I think what you said is fully correct. That of course, notably the negotiations on a legal text takes time. And what I can say, maybe two things. First of all, that of course it is true that this will take time. There will be also a transition period for this regulation. At the same time, implementation has already started, if I may say so. So there is already a kind of path which has started. Think, for example, of standardization organizations that have already worked because they understood that within the EU something will change. So they have started to look at how to integrate ethical aspects, at how to integrate specific technical considerations to match the objective set in the EU regulation. So there is already, you see, a path which, starts this let's say, which is quite reassuring in the context of the long journey we have ahead. And the second consideration is that also the framework is flexible. So we have some flexibility in terms of identification of risks, in terms of requirement enforcement instruments, to make sure that we can easily, without these long procedures, adapt the instrument to technical progress to emerging risks. This is also another important consideration. Now, when we come to virtual reality, two final notes, or to anyway, the risks, notably for people that, notably through the use of certain subliminal technique. I already mentioned before, what we are trying to provide with AI is a legal response which will provide also legal empowerments to take actions against these risks. And I think we are taking a kind of broad approach because, as I said, first of all, we will prohibit certain practices, notably with regard to subliminal manipulation. They will be prohibited. So the member states can act against them and they have a legal empowerment to do that. On the other hand, there is another point I could not mention before. We also have some transparency obligations for also AI systems which are not a risk but pose transparency risks, chatbots, deepfakes, just to make an example, or emotional recognition systems. There are really typical systems that could endanger the counterpart. And what we are setting is still in a proportionate manner. We want that the persons exposed receive the correct information that they are interacting with an AI. Because as you said, we don't know in the future how this interaction could work. So we know that the people are correctly informed. Probably we are not asking too much, but we still think that this information for these systems is fundamental to let's say, limit at least and minimize the level of risk and maximize the level of information which reaches the persons exposed to those systems. Last point, on the governance, we will have an inclusive governance for this system, because what we create, this is for the AI Act, but also in other acts related to data that we did not discuss today, that the EU is working on, we have new AI EU level governance systems which involve the overall community, including the stakeholders. So I think it will be a great opportunity where in an inclusive manner we can work to make those rules actually work, to make them meaningful, let's say, during the lifetime of this regulation. So I hope these notes are of help and also to a certain extent reassuring. Thank you.
Thank you. And reassurance is always helpful, but I think we've had that as a bit of a red thread through what we've been talking about. We had great messages from Davina this morning about how to feel calm and connected during the fast pace of change. And it's great to know that the European Commission is forward-looking and trying to the extent possible to forward-proof the regulatory environment so that there is some connection to where we see the direction of technology changing. Thank you all to our panel, to Ivana, to Niels, to Nenya, and to Salvatore. It was really interesting exchange, and it was a really valuable conversation linking the digital environment to education and democracy. I'm now going to say that we're going to encourage you to take a 10-minute break, get up, move around, get a glass of water, to switch off from your screen for just a few minutes. It's good for your mind, it's good for your body. And while we're encouraging you to take some time away, we also are going to show you a very brief video on digital skills and job platform from DG Connect. We're going to start again at 11:40 promptly, so that gives you about 12 minutes to have a break before we start again in our next session. Thank you to our fantastic panelists this morning, and see you after the break.
Digital transformation impacts how we live, work, and learn. Technologies can help us to recover from the pandemic, but we need digital talent to make the most of them. If you agree, visit the Digital Skills and Jobs platform, the home of European initiatives on digital skills and jobs. Together with the Digital Europe programme and the Digital Skills and Jobs Coalition, the platform fosters European expertise in advanced digital technologies. It will help you to digitally upskill yourself, your employees, students, or people in your community. The platform offers training and funding opportunities, national and EU actions, good practices and resources, data and insights, an active community, news and events, and much more. To put it simply, the platform helps you find what you need and connects you with whom you need. Join the community and contribute to building the home of digital skills in Europe.
Welcome back, everybody. Just before the break, we were talking about the importance of intersectionality, recognizing that our communities and our societies are not homogenous, they're heterogeneous. And we're going to pick up a little bit on that in this new panel, where we're going to explore active aging and intergenerational cooperation in education. So I'm delighted to introduce some of the members of our panel who will help us to explore this and understand how this applies to the world of adult education and to the digital environment. Joining me on my panel, I have Philippe Seidel-Leroy, a Policy and European Parliament Liaison Officer at Age Platform Europe. I have Dina Schwerer, the professor at Coimbra Higher Educational School, the Polytechnic Institute of Coimbra, and a board member of the European Association for the Education of Adults. I have Dagmar Hirsche, a German entrepreneur and founder of the NGO Wege aus der Einsamkeit. I apologize if I've not pronounced that very well. And also Iveta Siruli, the founder and coordinator of the Senior University in Latvia. Welcome to all of you. So let's start by the fact that often the approach to adult education tends to be a bit utilitarian, that the purpose of adult education is for employability. And that means for policymakers, their return on investment calculations are very different for older adults. And this means that perhaps there might be less focus and less attention to that. And we aren't seeing older people as a heterogeneous group who are both educators and learners. Now, the last 18 months have taught us the power of collaboration. And with the big societal challenges we have ahead of us, and we've talked about that for the last 2 days, decarbonising our economy, tackling climate change, re-establishing peace and security, we need a whole of society response to some of these big things. And that means we need to be able to tap into the brains and experience of older generations, who also might have more time to go in depth and find new angles to a problem. Now we recognise that for former heads of state, former prime ministers who often get named to lead big panels on behalf of the UN, etc. But somehow we don't see the rest of the older population in that same way, with useful expertise or insight, but therefore not also limited by their needs for career progression. So they have so much to contribute. Philippe, let me bring you in as someone representing the platform for older people. Why don't we see older people in that same way as having a contribution, expertise, and opportunity to contribute? And does that affect the way that the adult learning environment is set up?
It's first of all, it's something very natural, actually, that we tend to focus our attention only on the high achievers, on those who have done something remarkable. This is true at any age, at any gender, at any group that we look at. But it is particularly true with older persons, as you mentioned. There are a lot of older persons who are, for example, successful founders of startups, but we don't see them because they're not as spectacular and innovative and groundbreaking as some of the startups that tend to be like garage to multinational company type startups. They tend to keep small, for instance. There are a lot of older persons who contribute. There's, for example, in more surprising ways, in Germany, there's a group called the Grannies Against the Far Right, and they every week stage protests against anti-Semitism or against other threats from the far right. In Belgium, there's the Grandparents for Climate, who take part in every single climate demonstration taking part here. A lot of older persons are crucial to the functioning of large NGOs such as Amnesty International or the Red Cross. They wouldn't be able to function without those volunteers who are part of that. But we tend not to see that, of course. That of course not, but that's what you said. So ultimately, it shows that we are actually all subject to ageism in a certain way. We tend to sketch out only those achievements that are sometimes the achievements that are remunerated in terms of money. So we tend to look only at people who actually gain their living with what they do. And it's part of the general theme of making older persons more invisible. We take or make them invisible. We tend to sketch them out only to have positive or negative headlines. And if we do, often we highlight them in a collective manner, talking about the elderly, for example, but not about older persons and a particular older person, except this older person, if this older person has done something really remarkable, and this then stands out. Yeah. So it is essentially the way we see old age. Maybe old age speaks also to our fears, because a lot of us do not want to age, do not want to be confronted with our own future, because we tend to associate old age with fragility, with disability and things like that, which of course is part of the experience of aging, but it's not only part of that. And so we need to highlight that more, and to raise awareness for this ageism, because we know that ageism hurts us, hurts ourselves, hurts others. It is negative for our health, it's negative for our income, it's negative for our economy, it's negative for our life expectancy. But it is something that we all need to be more aware of.
Thank you. And again, you're making the link to the topic we had yesterday and early this morning about fear, and how fear limits what you see, limits therefore your ability to make decisions that are effective in a broader context. And as you say, people tend to fear getting older because of the implications of loss of control, loss of relevance, loss of power, loss of strength, etc. So maybe it's this fear that is making older generations being seen just through this box, this lens of being the elderly. Let me bring in Dagmar at this point, because public authorities have been looking to find ways to save money for years. And one obvious answer is to put public services online. It's a fantastic cost reduction. So their approach to offering digital skills for older people tends to be focused on how to give people the minimum skills they need in order to interact with these public services. And that's great. It's important for equality. But what that doesn't do is provide a full range of skills for older people for a range of things they might want to do, from, yes, being able to fill out a form, a government form, but advanced coding skills, online selling skills. From your perspective, in your NGO, you advocate for older people's active participation in the digital world. Can you give me a sense of what active participation actually means, and how do we increase the ambition of the offerings that we have for older people on digital skills?
Yes, sure. Because I say hello from Berlin, and I'm sitting here with 50 people between 72 and 87 who want to learn how to use a smartphone. And they came every week, and we say it's extremely important to explain to people over 65 that lifelong learning is an absolutely necessary in our area in this time. Because our world become more and more digital, and we lost a lot of people over 70, 80 or 90 years old. We see it in Germany. If you see the statistics, only 30% of the people over 80 years are old. They are onliner. So 70% of these people are offliner, and we have to find ways to take them with us in this digital world. And we say without participation, one exclusion oneself. In contrast, civil association, companies and politics must offer free digital training courses, because why should older people pay for something what they don't want to learn, but what they have to learn, because the world say everything is digital and we have no idea how to take people over 70 into this digital world. I think this is very important. The education offers must be tailored to the target groups, to these special groups. And we have found out that we train with fun Fun is a very, very important thing for elderly people to go with us in this digital world. Without fun, you will not be successful. This is our experience we make. So far, we have welcomed over 14,000 elderly people between 75 and 95 years old. We take them with us in the digital world before Corona was coming analog, and now we make it by digital or both digital and analog together. And we found out we have so many fun when we dance with them over Zoom. The dancing is interesting, but how to use Zoom? They learn how to use digital devices. And I think we have to show this people that it can make a lot of fun. And when they see the fun, they found out it can be helpful for their own life, to be in their own rooms, not to go in a care home. So a lot of things and a lot of startups have to think how they reach people over 65 with a digital device. I think this is very, very important.
Thank you. And I love the fact that we should bring fun back into our adult learning and our environment. Let me bring in Dina at this point, because you're another person who features on our community stories on the EPALE website, and we encourage people to go and have a look and be inspired by the different stories. But you talk about a program you've led in particularly in rural areas. And this is a specific challenge for some European countries, which are seeing small villages die out as young people leave to go to the city to find work, and then older people leave when there's no longer the services that they rely on available in the rural areas. So what do you think are the main challenges in rural areas? I mean, the obvious ones might be connectivity, but, you know, there's the fun aspect that Dagmar spoke about, the social aspect. How did you overcome some of these challenges? And do you think that adult education could revitalize some of these rural areas where people are leaving them because they don't see opportunity?
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm delighted to be here and very happy and grateful to have the opportunity to discuss this issue and participate. Thank you very much. I believe with all my heart that rural areas are fun. They are close to nature. They are close to traditions. So beginning with a positive note about the rural areas, we have lots of challenges, of course. And some of the challenges are related to isolation, desertification. So we need to provide access to everyone by reaching even the most isolated population. Of course, we have some problems related low literacy levels that constitutes obviously a barrier towards participation of people, and bad internet connection, as you said earlier. So digital learning is not a useful answer for some of our learners. The difference of the rural areas and the urban areas are related also to the needs of the people, are related to the conditions in which learning takes place, and they differ, and also the reasons for participation. We have some important barriers related to the opportunities and the programs, like the definition of a minimum number of participants to open an opportunity for learning. We have to have a group, but if we have so few people living in different areas, isolated areas, are they worth it? Yes, I believe if we have one person, that is worth it. We have to go where no one goes, go where people are. So we have some problems related to flexibility, some conditions like transportation, and of course, free participation without costs for people. Because we are talking about mostly a population without many financial resources. Another huge challenge for us is to fight the discredit of the value of investment in education for and with older people in isolation contexts. So that struggle is very important for us to value the richness of the educational potential for adult learners and for communities. There is some educational offers, very creative, some interesting examples like mobile libraries on wheels that go and visit the older people in the villages. But we have not so many offers in isolation locations with low population density. The educational services are pretty much concentrated in cities, and there is no decentralized or itinerant offers to that population that is isolated. We have now seen some efforts towards aging in place. So, and pushed by the pandemic, it has increased the personalized learning services at home along with care services. So there is a trying to integrate actions of the educational and the social areas. We are not there, I believe, but there is some progress replacing the assistance perspective with an empowering and humanistic perspective, focus on potentialities, not just on needs, on fragilities, but on potentialities of the people and of the communities. And of course, with commitment to autonomy of the older people. So I believe participation of the older people in the design of policies and programs that have impact on their lives, it's very important. By strategies of active listening, participatory approaches that not only values the voice, but the decision of the people. So nothing for the elderly without the elderly, nothing for old people without old people. So make potential learners and older learners part of the old process of designing, development, and of course, evaluation. And older people, I believe, are really agents of their own education, of their own change and transformation of the communities and of society and of the world. So there are some values that we cherish, like proximity, engagement, and of course, friendship. I believe affection is very important, fun and love. We need more love to work with people, promoting community-based action, supporting communities' self-organization with a commitment, with real investment on people, not numbers, people that live wherever they are, in a right-based view, in a supporting the idea of learning and education as an end in itself. So for me, it's very important that the municipalities are very important in this concern. They have a huge role to guarantee free participation, transformation, other conditions that we need to work on. We also have to create synergies, collaborating with people who are closer to the reality, support local partners, associations, social institutions that already work in the rural areas to sustain and expand their services beyond care offers, linking the social services to the educational ones in an integrated approach. So recognizing also the value of non-formal adult education, of community education, the value for citizens, for communities, with proper, adequate funding.
Excellent, thank you. And I'm sure funding is going to be a key theme for all speakers as we go forward. Let me now bring in Iveta, because we heard from Dina the value of education and the importance of involving older people in developing the curriculum and helping to set the framework for it. Now, you established a senior university in Latvia. Can you tell us about that? How did it start and what were the challenges and what does it now deliver?
Okay, good morning, good afternoon, and greetings from Latvia. So I'm very grateful, as all participants here, to be on this panel and to share Latvia experience. So first of all, I want to say congratulations to everyone present here. Each day we become 1 day older, okay? And nowadays we speak not only about third age education, about fourth age, we even are focusing on the fifth age, which is like extremely maybe old people close to 100 years old, okay? So I represent Latvia. We are just 2 million people population. We are green, we are creative, we are open-minded. Our advantage is excellent internet connection. We are pioneers globally in the 5G technology. And this is giving us some priorities. 1/3 of the population out of 2 million are people, we say, starting third age, 55, 60 plus. And so far in Latvia, we have no social initiative, no educational movement tailored for the third age, fourth age, fifth age adult learners. And I was inspired in 2016-17 in the framework of one European project, DIAL, Digital Competencies for Seniors, by experience coming from Portugal, from the global network Rutish, originated 2005. And I thought, okay, maybe I can start the same in Latvia. So we launched some groups here in Latvia. We are following a global network learning content building blocks. We have training on digital competencies, training on healthy and active lifestyle, training on personal development, including entrepreneurial competencies, financial competencies, environmental attitudes, and finally also languages. We are training our seniors basic English and also advanced English. And just looking at the Latvia case, what I want to say, people are willing to learn. We have a lot of senior learners. They say, please organize a group. And here I can agree with Dina's statement so far. To launch the group, even online, we need a certain amount of people. Okay, so in Latvia, we fixed this as around minimum 15, maximum 25 people. We are now in Zoom. We are using Zoom as a teaching training platform. And this was a bit of challenge to connect each of our learners doing this pilot testing in Latvia. I invested starting 20 minutes per person, and maximum was 1 hour, 27 minutes to train person to get into Zoom. And this is a huge success for us as a country, because so far no initiatives at all doing this blended learning, on-site, online, or just online learning. So I do believe this pandemic period is bringing us like huge opportunities. And in 2019, when I started in Latvia this movement, I could never imagine that we will move in a 1 year time to the Zoom. It was like dream impossible. So basically that's all by me. And just to add, we even launched sport club activities online. We do this Monday mornings, Friday mornings, and all people connected to the senior university network here in Latvia, they have unique rights to do these sport activities, and they are very happy also to do activities online. That's all by me.
Thank you, Iveta. Let me come back to Philippe for a moment, but with your perspective of the age platform across Europe. Digital learning has, I think, one very interesting aspect in the sense that it can lower the threshold to access things. So if you think about an ordinary classroom, it might be held in a building on the 3rd floor without a lift. So there might be huge accessibility challenges for older people who may not be able to walk so far, who can't climb stairs. But digital takes all of that away. Once, as Iveta said, they've had the training, and being able to use it. Our focus to yesterday and today is adult learning. Philippe, do you see digital tools as, the sort of secret power that would allow adult learning to reach more older people and to give them more opportunity? Or is it something that just creates more barriers? Because, as you say, you've got to address a new technology, you've got to learn how to use it, how to update it. Where does the balance lie in your perspective?
Well, I would say I wouldn't strike the balance. It's both at the time, both at once. So as you say, as also Dina pointed out, especially in rural areas, there are simply no sufficient offers for adult learning that are tailored to older persons. So those are areas which are very difficult to reach. And you rightly say that there's a huge potential to develop learning via online tools, especially there. But on the other hand, there's a lot of people who are unable to access this, and even unable to access the training which is needed to get access. Because even for this, you will need equipment which is expensive. You will need an internet connection. There's not a lot of rural areas in the EU which are connected to broadband or 4G. I mean, Latvia is a good example here, but this is not the case everywhere. So equipment is expensive. It needs to be up to date. Connections need to be there. You have to pay your connections. So there's a lot of very concrete barriers, which are not necessarily related to skills. And then you also have the skills barrier, which is there because, those who are now in retirement are usually those who didn't have to work a lot with digital technologies during their working years, so they didn't have to develop the skills. So actually developing the skills becomes something very voluntary in this sense. And I like a lot something that Dina said and Dagmar before, that learning needs to be fun. And this is especially true for older persons, because when you're no longer active in the labor market, you're not learning to get money or to make more money. You're learning only because of the pure benefit of learning, which is having some interesting exchanges with peers. Meeting peers, physically meeting peers, is also something which is a strong motivation to engage in learning, which obviously you don't have that much if it's only digital. And so you need to put an extra effort in making it fun and underlining also these aspects, which are not only related to the content that you learn, but also to the exchange. And yeah, so this is an extra challenge. It can also be a hook to bring people into learning about digital skills, because you can show them, well, you can access these interactions with the tools that we're going to show you. But the tools are just tools. And this is maybe more true for older persons than for many others who are already using these tools.
Thank you, Philippe. And I must apologise on behalf of one of our panelists, Dagmar. She's had to leave the call at the moment because there's an electricity problem where she is, but hopefully she'll be able to come back and join us. Let me bring in Sarah, because she's been watching the online comments and chats to see, is the audience inspired by what we're talking about? Any comments or questions for our panelists?
Yeah, actually, we have someone congratulating and thanking the panelists for their insights, and we have a specific question about, let's say, a stereotype within the stereotype, or stereotypes within the stereotypes, which is about gender. So, I would like to know your comments and ideas about gender stereotypes and gender roles. How do they come into the pictures? So
thank you for that. And any member of the panel might like to pick up on that. And just, for context, if you look at life expectancy, women have a longer life expectancies than men. So amongst the older population, there will be more women represented. So the issue of gender stereotypes, I think, has a particular relevance for the older communities. Dina, I see you nodding a little bit. Would you like to kick us off how you see the gender aspects in the way you work?
Yes, thank you. I agree, because it is very important to discuss it. Lots of the caregivers are women, and most of them are elderly women. So taking care of elderly people. So there is some work to do, lots of work to do, to give conditions, training, support to that people. They are not just informal carers, but also in contexts, in institutional contexts, they are mostly caregivers are women. So we need to address that and to facilitate their conditions to work, to support them, and to train them. And also we have some concerns about other kinds of issues related to violence towards women, towards older women. We have domestic violence, financial violence. So we have not, of course, not everything is negative, but I want to highlight what we necessarily have to act upon, and to engage in working to facilitate the overload burden of some of the women that are caregivers.
Thank you. Iveta, would you like to come in and, on this one as well, particularly how you address gender aspects within your senior university?
Yeah, and this is correct. Life expectancy is attacking men and women differently. Okay, we have the same, let's say, real life situation here in Latvia. Is the older our population, the less men and majority are women. Okay. And what I would like maybe to point out here, maybe interesting from the Latvia Senior University previous two academic year sessions, I was not so concerned about gender issue at all. But one day, ladies asked me, maybe I can bring in more teachers, trainers, men. And this was really a surprise for me. And I said, okay, we will try. And today we are having excellent teacher, digital competencies teacher. He is teacher himself. He is 30, maybe 5 years young. And this is the only teacher that have no objection by senior lovely ladies when he is delivering a teaching. Okay. And I asked, ladies, how it come? And they said, he is man and we like him. And this is maybe a fun moment here, but you see, I have never thought about gender issues regarding adult educators. Okay, I knew that majority, because I know my adult learner profile, 98% at this stage piloting the senior university social initiative model here in Latvia are ladies. And we have only some men, and men due to the life expectancy. And secondly, it's just the culture in Latvia that ladies are more active than men. Okay, fortunately or unfortunately. And I was a little bit surprised when I was asked to bring in more teacher manpower regarding the gender balance. So, so I would say that this is not maybe a serious issue at this stage, but this gender balance is for sure linked also with opportunities for elderly people to learn. And I think this is the main challenge for us, that we have people here, but we have no services for them. Free of charge, for symbolic payment, for whatever even payment. All educational services are capped for students, for youth, for children, and elderly are out of the education market for long life education in general. That's all by me.
Thank you. Sarah, do we have another question from our audience?
Yes. Yeah, sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. Yes, we have another question that actually touched upon an issue that hasn't come really into the discourse, so maybe it's good to address it. It's about intergenerational learning. So it's a very simple question. Can someone talk about intergenerational learning and its chances to help both sides?
Philippe, I think maybe this is going to land on your desk.
Yes, well, we really like intergenerational learning, because I was talking about this motivational aspect. It is, as Iveta just pointed out, it is also a huge incentive for older persons to interact with younger persons, and this is also an incentive for learning. Of course, older persons can learn a lot from younger persons in terms of digital skills, etc. It's also the other way around. It's often highlighted in the workplace, actually, where intergenerational teams are more effective, because older persons have so much experience that they, and maybe a different view on things, that they can share with their younger colleagues, and so that every sort of skill set and experience set is bringing out the best out of the team. And the same is true in outside of the labor market, of course. I mean, there's plenty of crafts that only older persons know and can transmit. There's plenty of experience of history. I read yesterday that the last member of the French resistance against the Nazis passed away yesterday, or the last couple of days. So it shows that how much weight is actually on the shoulders of older persons, and how much untold stories there are to be passed on. I also want to come back to this gender discussion very briefly. It's maybe linked to that. Actually, women are very active in the intergenerational sphere, as you talked about caregiving, etc. And I myself had an unconscious bias when I was talking about the achievements of older persons, and I left out the care aspect. If all older women would stop caring for other older persons or their grandchildren, we would have a huge economic problem. And this is something which is not shown, which is not necessarily brought forward, but which is part of a lot of our individual experiences when we think about how we were with our grandparents, grandmothers, or mothers, but depending on our age and their age, and how we interact with older persons. Actually, I heard yesterday that there's a lot of very good experiences in Sweden, probably also elsewhere, where older persons from residential care or other care facilities are brought into daycare centers for children to read stories, just to interact and to come regularly. And it is a way to already change stereotypes about older age, because in our mobile world, children do not live necessarily next to their grandparents, and so they have no experience about what actually an older person is, although we start acquiring age stereotypes at a young age. So it is very beneficial for them, because they see older persons as people where they have positive experiences with, and which are active, which are doing things that are different than their own parents do. And it's, of course, very beneficial to the older persons themselves, because it gives them a sense of purpose. It gives them a sense of community. Everyone likes to be around children, or almost everyone, I would say. So it also gives them, it improves their mental health, and then by extension also their physical health. So there's a lot of potential for that.
Okay. Thank you, Philippe. I'm about to close the panel, but I have another minute and a half left. And Iveta, I know that you wanted to contribute something, so please go ahead.
Yeah, and this will be really fast. Just to contribute on the intergenerational learning, next year we are launching the platform with the title Senior University Latvia. So whenever you are seated, you can join it. Okay, and finally, we also launch under Senior University umbrella also the initiative Intergenerational Business Incubator. My major education and also research is linked with business incubation and entrepreneurial competencies, and we already have some teams with younger and elderly, and mostly they will try to commercialize creative skills, some cultural heritage related activities, also healthy cooking, and we will see how this will work out. We will have this at the beginning of year online mode, but we are really launching this in the premises of one public university business incubator, and this will be a special program with the title Intergenerational Incubator. So that's all by me.
Thanks, Iveta. And if you give us the information, we can put it in the chat, the link to the website, so people can join it. I'm going to bring this panel to a close. Say a very warm thank you to Philippe, to Dina, to Iveta and Dagmar, who was with us at the beginning. We picked up on this issue of intergenerational solidarity and the nature of how adults learning could provide opportunity, but also challenges for the older generation. So thank you very much for helping us to think through this, particularly touching on digital aspects. Thank you all. I'm now going to pass to the next part of our panel, and I'm delighted to introduce our next speaker, and that's Mrs. Manuela Galeng, the Director for Skills for the European Commission in the Directorate General for Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion. Mrs. Galeng, you're very welcome to join us. We've had 2 fantastic days, some really wonderful exchanges. We've learned how to slow ourselves down in a world that moves fast. We've learned how to bring joy and fun into learning. We've learned how learning, and particularly digital learning, is key to the developments that are coming forward for AI, and how Europe is leading the world in trying to develop a human-centered approach to the digital environment. So it's been a really exciting 2 days. Let me pass the floor to you to give us some insight about where to go next.
Thank you, Tasmin, and thank you, Rose. And I think these were really 2 very important days, no, to discuss the topic of transitions and the role that adult learning really plays in this context for ensuring that the change that we have before us, whether it's digital or green, is an inclusive change, basically, that leaves nobody behind. And I think these 2 days were also a very good opportunity to reflect on the past 18 months of learning, working and living in COVID-19, and looking ahead now how adult learning can play its full part in the recovery. And clearly, we know COVID has put digital skills at the center, but it's clear that if we want to have a green transition that is successful, it will also need to be very firmly anchored in skills. And just in a few weeks' time, world leaders will meet in Glasgow to take the next steps towards tackling climate change. We all know as EU that the European Green Deal is our strategy for achieving climate neutrality by 2050. And as first step in July, the Commission has put forward a package called Fit for 55, so for committing to cutting emissions by at least 55% by 2030. So clearly, this will be a joint effort within the EU across all jobs, across all parts of the economy, and across all parts of society. And what that means, it means that we really need to very quickly develop the skills for a sustainable future. So adult learning, what was discussed during these 2 days, is quite rightly in the spotlight. This all brings a strengthened urgency to provide more adult learning, more upskilling and reskilling opportunities to individuals, opening up learning opportunities for all and in all learning environments, whether at work or in the community. It is also important to make learning even more accessible and ensure that nobody is left behind. And this is clearly at the center of the European Pillar of Social Rights, which is our policy compass for a strong social Europe, which puts skills as the first principle. The Pillar Action Plan sets actually out that by 2030, 60% of all adults should participate in training every year. This commitment was welcomed by EU leaders, so the ambition is there and it is a shared one. But how can ambition become a reality? I think there is still a lot to be done and a lot of action to be taken by all of us. If we look back, one crucial building block remains upskilling pathways. That is the possibility to give an opportunity to people with low levels of skills and qualifications to gain the skills, whether they are literacy, numeracy, or digital skills, that enable them to progress towards wider qualifications. And we are now in the process of evaluating progress from this council recommendation, and we will report back next year on progress achieved so far. But taking forward the skills agenda, the Commission also plans to bring forward by December this year 2 very important proposals that should really underpin our objective to increase upskilling and reskilling of adults. One is a proposal on establishing individual learning accounts, and the second one is a proposal for a European approach to micro-credentials. So let me explain in turn each of the two, and I'm sure you have already spoken a bit about them during these 2 days. So first of all, the individual learning accounts. Here the idea is really to put the individual in the driving seat, because it is the individuals that need to have the motivation to take up training. And this is what this initiative is looking at. It not just to create demand by individuals to take up training, because every one of us needs to upskill and reskill if we want to keep pace with change. And as we are embarking more in training, it is also important that this training, the learning outcome from this training, is recognized and validated. And that's why we will be putting forward, at the same time as the initiative on individual learning account, a proposal on micro-credential, a European approach to micro-credentials that aims at creating trust and a shared understanding of what these learning outcomes from these training courses are. This will facilitate the job of the individual in showing to an employer, for instance, what he or she knows, but also for the employer, because this type of learning will be underpinned by a micro-credential. Now, more learning will require more money. And money is there because, as you know, the EU has put forward EU Recovery and Resilience Facility, EU Next Generation, that is endowed with 720 billion in loans and grants. And one of the 7 priorities is upskilling and reskilling. So funding is there. It's now for you in the member states to make the best use possible. We have also the European Social Fund, which remains the largest European funding instrument for investing in human capital. So, against this backdrop, and in concluding, I would like now to highlight the role of EPALE, because you really bring the adult learning community together. You help sharing the information, help learning from each other. You have kept connected and dynamic throughout the pandemic. It's really a great example of how working together online can bear the fruits. So big thanks to you, EPALE community, and a big thanks to Tasmin Rose for the moderation during these 2 days. And I wish you all, and all of us actually, in the adult learning community in taking forward our shared ambition of making learning a reality for all adults. And I am looking forward to further cooperation with you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Manuela, for sharing the insights that you did from the European Commission and reminding us that the potential is there, that the funding is there, and the instruments are there, and it's now up to the community to see how to best utilize it and apply it along the lines that we've just been discussing for the last few days. So a warm thank you to you and your Commission colleagues who've helped us to develop the programme for this conference. So it now comes to me to have I have on my programme, it says closing remarks, and I have the challenging task of trying to sum up 2 fabulous, exciting, interactive days in just a few minutes. So let me just take you through some of the highlights of what we discussed. We opened yesterday by seeing where we're going in the adult learning community and recognizing that Europe is just one part of the world. And so we had a global panel that shared experience from different parts of the world. We heard from South Africa, what was happening in the African region, examples of how the pandemic acted as an accelerator for technological change and the rollout of different adult learning perspectives. We also heard from experience from other parts of the world, and we saw where Europe fits into that. Of course, when we look at the adult learning perspective, the fact that Europe is about to be the oldest continent in the world means that we need to address the intergenerational aspects of what we were doing. But we heard, and it was highlighted again by Manuela just now, what's being proposed about the individual learning account and micro-credentials, this understanding that skills themselves are no longer big blocks of modules. They're now being broken down into much smaller pieces that people could acquire in their own time, in their workplace. The learnings that they do themselves could be validated and understood, and particularly by employers, because there's a big mismatch between what employers want and what people come to. We also recognized, and we heard this from some of the different details and from the OECD, that there's a mismatch between what's being developed through the educational sector, which moves at a certain pace because it develops curricula over time, and the needs of our labour market and society's expectations. So big challenges were being put on the table by that. Then our next panel, which I found personally empowering and inspiring, was stories that you'll find on the EPALE community stories. People talking about unusual places to run adult learning experiences. So we heard about education activities in prisons and how this can help people integrate and take on a new identity, that of a student rather than just a prisoner, and that sponsors them in their way back and reintegration into life. We heard about a program that it brings art and culture and beauty to psychiatric wards, to homeless communities, to therapeutic environments, because the understanding that everyone should have the right to access and have a view on and discuss and explore culture. We heard from Poland an example about how do you convene people together and talk about difficult issues, controversial issues, issues where people have polarized views around human rights, and have used popular culture, media and films as a way of opening up these difficult encounters in a space that allows everyone's rights to be heard and respected. So other examples of how adult education is a bridge to a more cohesive and connected society. And then we closed yesterday with a keynote with Otto Scharmer, and he gave us some really useful concepts that we need to do. He invited us to look around us and realize that we are in an attention economy. We may think that we're spending money every day, but reality is that it's our attention that has a value. Advertisers want it, retailers want it, they want our eyeballs in front of their machines. And how we choose to spend our attention, where we give it, what we give it to, has a real life consequence. And he encourages us to move from ego to eco. He encouraged us to move from silo to system, to see everything connected. And he said that we've never had more knowledge in the world. It's being generated all the time. But so we know what to do, we just don't necessarily do it. So we have what he called a head-hand gap. And he said, what connects the two? It has to go through the heart. He encouraged us to be grounded in our values, what's important to us, and use that to direct our head, direct our attention to what supports that and what helps to build the kind of co-created future that we want. So he encouraged us to pay attention to our attention. What we put attention to indicates where we're going to spend our time. What we spend on our time on indicates what gets done. It indicates how we engage with each other. And we can either follow the flow online, which is full of anger and resentment and toxicity, because that's what generates the most content, and content makes money in a monetized economy. And he invited us to take a step back and say to be more intentional with where we placed our attention. And that was a very good message to close yesterday. We started this morning with Divina, who gave us another keynote and encouraged us to explore the media environment. And she gave us a few other concepts to think about critical views. And once people know what to look for, once they can understand what might be behind the media images and messages they're being presented with, they can see, this is designed to trigger hate or to trigger anger or frustration. This is a touch point that's being blown out of perspective, and it's designed to try and manipulate me. So people can be given the skills. But she also said it's not an injection, it's not a vaccination. You can't inoculate it. It's not a one shot and it's over. It's an iterative process. And you need to bring communities together in the real world to explore and discuss context so we can understand what's happening in the digital environment. She also gave us this very valuable opportunity to say when the world is faster around us and there's constant pressure, we reconnect with what our passions are. We reconnect with our joy, and this gives us a chance to breathe, to slow down, so we can give ourselves a moment of quiet and calm in a fast changing world. And once you feel less pressured and stressed by the speed of change, then you have more choices. Because the red thread that moved, I think, through yesterday and today is how fear limits what we see, it limits what we understand, it limits our choices and options for the way forward. And we need to not move from a position of deficit that was brought up by one of our speakers today, when he was explaining how we see older people from a viewpoint of deficit, what they can't do, and how adult learning is all about giving people potential and opening opportunity. And so we were encouraged to take that perspective. We talked about digital democracy in our panel this morning. We talked about the dangers of it, the risks of it, but also the tremendous power if digital is used for participation and engagement. Instead of a democracy being an appointment we have every 5 years for elections, it can be an ongoing conversation where people are involved at local level, at national level, in movements, in activism, in using our collective power together to effect positive change that we want to see, rather than being victim of decisions that are taken elsewhere. And in our final panel, just before we closed, we explored the intergenerational aspect. We challenged gender stereotypes and age stereotypes. We recognize that there's no one section of the population that is homogenous. They're very different. And the benefits of the digital platforms that we have is the possibility to tailor and to personalize and to offer people different opportunities to engage from wherever they are to wherever they want to get to. So we were encouraged to use the power of digital to support rather than to act as a barrier. But we also put very clearly that the digital learning environment, for all of its benefits and opportunities, still needs energy. It still needs infrastructure, it still needs money and training, and then will need to be an investment by public authorities in that infrastructure to allow the development and continuity of our adult learning and what it can do for our society. And we closed just now with the messages from Manuela from the European Commission with what's been coming, and a message that it's in the social pillar of rights, which was declared in 2017 and reaffirmed in Porto this year, where the first of the 20 rights that's identified is education and skills, because it's being seen as absolutely intrinsic to our knowledge and to our experience of being human. So I hope I've done justice to what I think was a really fabulous, exciting 2 days where we really explored the power of adult learning to shape a sustainable future for Europe. So let's just have a few sense of the numbers of people who were involved in the past 2 days. We had over 1,330 individual views and more than 600 people as participants and actively engaging in the comments and the feedback. So it was a very lively audience, and we thank you for all of your time. I have a few more things that I'd like to share with you which will help take the conversation further. And the first thing I want to tell you about is that I may be closing this EPALE community conference, but it's not the end of our conversation. There's lots of other things coming up, and we're about to show you now the Erasmus Days on the 14th, 15th and 16th of October, which is 3 days of celebration of Erasmus+. And it's a unique opportunity for you to share your Erasmus experience or spread the word about a project that you've been involved with. The international mobility and European citizenships are yet again back at the heart of the Erasmus Days 2021. There'll be exhibitions, contests, concerts, seminars, partner networking, open days, and distribution of Europass mobility documents. So lots of things happening, and you'll find local events being organised by and for citizens. So please check that out. It's the hashtag is Erasmus Days 2021. Please go and find out what else you can see. Coming back now to the EPALE mobile app. We're really pleased to tell you that in the next few weeks, there'll be a new way to enjoy and engage with EPALE. We heard that there are now 200,000 average users on a monthly basis, and we have just hit the milestone of 100,000 registered users of the EPALE platform. Now, when you get to that size, we want to offer more ways for you to engage, and this is now EPALE in your pocket. So we're launching this new mobile app in the next couple of weeks, and it gives you a chance to have EPALE with you wherever you go, so you can engage and participate. So now let me bring you to more specific opportunities. We've got some workshops that are happening on the 18th and the 19th of October. We've got 4 workshops that you can only access after registration because the participation numbers are limited. And you should see on your screen links to different workshops. So we've got one on the 18th of October from 10 to 11 on innovation's role in the new normal of basic skills training. We've got one from 11:30 to 12:30 on the same day, the 18th, boosting outreach through partnership building. On the 19th, we've also got something between 10 and 11 on green education in practice, and from 11:30 to 12:30 on diversity and safe space in adult learning. And you'll find the links on the chat and on screen. We also have national panels, which are an opportunity for the communities in different countries to come together in their own language and explore some of the issues they want to talk about. And we've had a total of 7, one of which for Slovakia has already taken place, but we have the national support services from 6 countries that are going to be sharing it. So that's Hungary, Latvia, Portugal, Serbia, Cyprus, and Germany. So if you want to join those, you'll find the links being shown to you. And of course, they'll be in the chat. You'll find them. And finally, we want to find out how your experience of the EPALE platform is. And again, I've been mentioning this for the last 2 days, but please tell us your views. Go to do the user survey and tell us what you like about the EPALE program. Yesterday, we heard that there'd been a big major upgrade. So we need to know that the platform is meeting your needs better and what else you'd like us to do. So you should see a QR code that allows you to participate in this. And then I'd like to show you the word cloud that you have co-created with us over the past 2 days. We asked you yesterday morning, what is the power of adult learning in shaping a sustainable future in Europe? And here on screen, you should see the results. And right in the beginning, in the heart of it, we've got awareness, activism, and collaborative learning. And I hope you were inspired, as I was, by some of the examples that we heard about how people are using adult learning to empower people, to give them information about their rights and how they can participate. And I think that's shown here at the center of our image. We've also got flexibility, social justice, engaging citizens. I'm particularly intrigued by the persons who said that when we said, what is the power of adult learning? Somebody said it was nuclear power. And I don't know if that means that it's exceptionally dangerous or that it's something you can rely on, but somebody thought it was nuclear power. We've got inclusive change, climate justice, fair transition. So this really important message. Somebody's also said it's overlooked, that it's a secret power. of adult learning. It's something we have within us, our entirely innately human capacity to share and learn together, and that we should use that skill more. Transformational change and innovation coming through. Somebody said it's a mega power. So lots of positive ideas about how adult learning could shape a sustainable future for Europe. So I'm going to bring our conference to a close. It's been a wonderful 2 days. I've really enjoyed listening to it and engaging with the conversations. But of course, I'm just a front face. There's a lot of people behind the scene who make this work, who make it such a smooth and easy transition for everyone. So I'm going to give you a chance to meet some of the people behind the scenes. So let me call them out and we'll see them on screen. So a warm thank you to the staff at the EPALE Central Support Service. Let's congratulate them all. So we should have Filippo, we should have Elisabetta, Giacomo. Give us a wave. Thank you. We should also be able to see Sarah, Claudia, Guido, and Carmen. Let's see you all, and we'll give you another thank you. And finally, thank you to Brian and to Sylvia, who are also joining, who are part of this team. So I hope I've captured everyone, and we can now see all the wonderful faces of people around us. These are the people who made our conference over the last 2 days. And I've had the pleasure of seeing them because I have the secret channel of the organizers. You haven't, and I know they've worked very hard. And I hope that meant your experience was seamless and smooth. So thank you all. Our next appointment will be this time next year for another EPALE community conference. I hope you've enjoyed it. There will be lots of videos to share and other materials, reports afterwards, which we hope you use the power of adult learning to transmit and share the passion that this community clearly feels for transforming towards a sustainable and more fair, inclusive society. Thank you all. Good luck, stay healthy, and see you soon. Bye.